Breaking news today. The Ukrainian symphony that Putin can't seem to shut down. Light is being brought in by two musicians on a rainy afternoon in Croydon. Veronika Lemoshenko, on the harp, and Natalia Subotina, on the cello, perform for and give an explanation of their music to a group of attentive, active 8th graders. They're even given a shot, despite their disproportionately small bodies looking out of place beneath the bulky equipment. I never expected to see musicians from Ukraine engaging in outreach work with British children while their country was being torn apart by a devastating war. Lemoshenko, who was in the UK as part of the National Symphony Orchestra of Ukraine's NSOU 17-date tour, disagrees. Such work with young children also occurs outside of Kyiv, despite the fact that their home country is under daily attack from Russian bombs. It's crucial to invest in and cultivate cultural awareness among the next generation, she tells me. This past August, I was in Kyiv teaching young harpists there at a summer harp academy. When the assault started, it was as if a musical war god answered the call. Ukrainian musicians have always had a "can-do, we're going nowhere" attitude. From the early days of the defiant and mournful videos of violinists in underground shelters and pianists playing Chopin in their bombed-out homes to the energetic performances by orchestral players who have not yet been conscripted. This is made evident in the evening concert, where the 83-member orchestra plays with ferocity, receiving a standing ovation and performing 3 encores after playing works by composers ranging from Richard Strauss to Boris Lyatoshansky of Ukraine. It's almost as if the Ukrainian people's valiant resistance to the Russian invasion has inspired the performers on stage. That's to be expected, considering how close the war actually is. 2 members of the orchestra, the cellist and the double bassist, each lost a brother. A lot of the older players have sons serving in the armed forces. They get up every day and check social media for the latest deaths, hoping it isn't anyone they know. Many people have offered their services as volunteers since the beginning of the war, working in shelters, providing food and medical care to those who have been displaced or who have lost their homes, and doing whatever else they can to help. One of the violists has joined the army, and Alexei Lee, the tuba player, is now a machine gunner in the Ukrainian army. Every day is a chance at death, and you take that risk every day. His principal trombonist friend, Andriy Holovko, says, "You start to appreciate what you didn't pay attention to before." The NSOU disbanded briefly at the outbreak of war, only to regroup later. In April 2022, they played their first concert since the invasion in the Phoenix-like setting of Venice's recently renovated opera house, La Fenice. It has been meeting and practicing in Kyiv, frequently under the watchful eye of armed drones or missiles. Rehearsals and concerts are frequently being disrupted by air alarms. Roman Alexienko, a trumpet player and deputy managing director, tells me that, during an alarm, we must hide in a shelter. One of the earliest viral images of the war featured him playing his trumpet in the ruins of his native Irpin. These concerts are frequently disrupted. One that they eventually gave up on entirely. Only 150 people will be allowed in the bomb shelter with the musicians and conductor. Whenever there is a threat, the musicians there start playing Bach. They've grown accustomed to the risks, to the point where they find them hilarious. A humorous complaint is that one person's mother, who is 83 years old, can't be brought down because it takes too long. But the invasion has certainly taken its toll. The musicians tell me that it has made them nervous and restless, on edge even during the most soothing, lyrical slow movement of a concerto for fear of danger. Considering the enthusiastic reception the tour has gotten so far and the rising anticipation for the remaining shows, it's safe to assume that this has heightened the intensity of the performances. Many theaters were eager to host this orchestra. Ukrainian culture deserves to be celebrated, says Mary Harrison, head of UK touring at IMG Artists. After an absence of 22 years, they have returned for their largest concert to date. She was completely blown away by the orchestra, which had been nominated for a Grammy. They make the best of their circumstances and refuse to give up. They won't stop scheduling shows because it's soul food and a break that people need desperately. The musicians have similar sentiments, saying that making music is a form of therapy that helps them cope with and escape from their difficult lives. The tour kicked off in Bath, and it will end on November 5 in Norwich, after making stops in London's Cadogan Hall, Cardiff, Edinburgh, and Perth along the way. Croydon will be the borough of culture for London in 2023. Typically, tours like this would only feature a small number of performances, but as word spread, more and more opportunities presented themselves. Local media have been eager to publicize the attendance of dignitaries from all over the country. Commons Speaker Lindsay Hoyle invited several members of the orchestra to Parliament on the day of their Croydon performance, where they performed works by Ukrainian composers Maxim Berezovsky and Miroslav Skorik, and Hoyle gave a speech of solidarity. The orchestra's managing director Alexander Hornostai told me that plans to visit the United Kingdom in some capacity had been discussed prior to COVID, but that after the war, demand spiked dramatically, and the megatour took shape over the course of the past 18 months. There's no denying the geopolitical undertones. Keeping Ukraine in the spotlight and sending a message of defiance, the orchestra has put a premium on touring. It's not surprising that it was received so enthusiastically in Taiwan, which is dwarfed by its more powerful and expansionist neighbor. After the Moscow Philharmonic Orchestra's plans were scrapped in the wake of Russia's invasion, the NSOU stepped in to fill the void. And it comes at a time when support is waning in some countries, the prospect of a much less sympathetic Trump presidency in the U.S. looms, and attention is shifting to the growing catastrophe in the Middle East after a devastating Hamas attack on Israelis and Israel's deadly retaliatory bombing of Gaza, which is a coincidence since these events are planned well in advance. The NSOU tour, along with those of groups like the Ukraine Freedom Orchestra, which features musicians based abroad, including some refugees, and the Lviv National Philharmonic Orchestra, serves as a sobering reminder that their war is far from over. Although many musicians have lost their lives and cultural centers have been attacked, the war has also shone a light on Ukrainian art. The classical music community in Ukraine has also taken advantage of the renewed interest in Ukrainian music to perform works by Ukrainian composers, who had previously been overshadowed by the more popular works of their Russian counterparts. Historically, most of our international partners wanted to listen to Russian music like Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff, Alexienko explains, making it difficult to spread Ukrainian music around the world through the orchestra's many tours. Now that they can export their music worldwide, we're thrilled to be able to play Ukrainian music. While Ukrainian musicians I've spoken with over the past year are divided on whether or not to perform works by Russian composers, given that these artists were frequently anti-government and oppressed, this tour is unabashedly non-Russian and meaningful. Lyatoshansky, the series' central figure, passed away in 1968, but his modern works retain the sensibility and romanticism of classical composers like Gustav Mahler. Volodymyr Serenko, the orchestra's artistic director and chief conductor, said that Lyatoshansky's symphonic work belongs among the best representatives of national composer schools, alongside the likes of Jean Sibelius, Karol Szymanowski, Bela Bartok, Leos Janáček, etc. Despite his reputation as the «godfather» of Ukrainian composers, Lyatoshansky has been largely forgotten in recent decades due to political considerations. The Communist Party slammed his rousing Symphony No. 2 as «anti-national, disharmonious, cluttered with unjustified thunderous sounds that depress the listener, and poor and colorless», despite the fact that it had been commissioned by the Soviet Composers Union. There was a lengthy ban on it. "As a composer, I am dead," Lyatoshansky said at the time. "And I do not know when I will be resurrected." That time may have come recently. The current tour, which features both the symphony and Lyatoshansky's gloomy but heroic 1955 work Grazina, is an integral part of that revival. Ukrainian music, including the overture to the opera Taras Bulba by Mykola Lysenko, is featured in the many encores that were demanded of the orchestra. From the more well-known Western classical canon, we have Franz Liszt's Mazeppa, which tells the story of a Ukrainian hero who fought against Russian imperialist forces in the 17th century, and two works by Jean Sibelius, his Symphony No. 1 and Finlandia, which symbolize Finland's nationalist struggle against Russian domination. Also featured prominently is Beethoven, who was no stranger to politics. Famously, after Napoleon declared himself emperor, this supporter of the ideals of the French Revolution tore up the dedication he had written for Napoleon in his Third Symphony, the Eroica. His fourth piano concerto was performed by the NSOU,